All right. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining tonight. The meeting is being recorded, so we'll be able to share it with others who couldn't connect tonight. And as I mentioned, I just posted a link in the chats to download the budget packet that Jessica has prepared and is going to go through. And I believe I also shared the file where you should be able to click on it directly. So hopefully one of those ways works for you to get the packet, but we'll be sharing it on our screen as well. So you'll be able to see that. And right now you're not able to unmute, but in just a moment, I'll turn it over to Jessica. She'll walk through the documents and then you'll be able to ask questions as we go through the presentation. Just wanted to highlight before Jessica starts the dates for fall conference and the deadlines up to that. Tonight we're sharing the budget and hoping congregations will be able to meet by September 15th to send in a congregational financial commitment for 2022 and also elect your delegates to the fall conference. If you're not able to meet by that date, it would be helpful if you could send in what you're expecting the amount to be, if it's going to be the same or maybe slightly more or less, or if especially if you know it's going to be a significant decrease for any reason. That's mainly what we need to know. If your congregation is going to have to lower its commitments from last year to the Mission Center or another ministry, and then that will allow us to do our planning as we shift. And then the conference deadlines after that are October 7th. That's 30 days before conference for submitting a resolution. And 4 weeks before conference is Saturday, October 9th, the deadline for reporting delegates from congregations. Each pastor and CFO or their designees are delegates, and then each congregation has a number of delegates they can elect based on membership size, and that's been sent out to pastors. And then finally, the date of fall conference is scheduled for Saturday, November 6th. We are scheduled for rooms to hold our group of about 400 at Saginaw Valley State. And at this point, they are allowing those gatherings, but we'll have to continue to monitor the information up to that point to see if it's going to be allowed and safe, and if we can offer to be online and in person. It gets a little bit more complicated to do both than it is to do one or the other. So we'll keep monitoring that, but the conference, one way or the other, we expect to be on November 6th. Okay. With that, we'll turn it over to Jessica. She'll work through the budget information, which is our primary reason for meeting. Again, I'll allow people to unmute to ask questions while she shares. And then if we have time, we'll open it up for other questions about conference or other Mission Center items. We do have to end the meeting by about 7:45 since we have our junior senior high sanctuary group meeting tonight after this. So let me put that up. All right, Jessica, you can go ahead.
First, I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your schedules to meet with us tonight. To go over this important information as we prepare for next year. That first page there is just a cover sheet saying what is in this packet. The first couple pages are the current through June 30th. I will give you a minute to look those over if you haven't seen them. And then if there are questions about any of that, we'll take those before we go into the proposed budget for next year. I did just notice at the top of that, it should be 2021 year-to-date actual. It still says 2020.
I do have one question. It looks like the big difference I'm seeing here is salaries and benefits. Is there a particular reason those are substantially less through June?
So far, we've still been working with a lower number of hours. Last year, early on, we some of the staff to just save some of those costs, and we weren't doing as many activities and that stuff because of COVID. So we've been working with lower hours, which is why it's not comparable to that full amount we had budgeted. And as a reminder, if any transfers are needed from the ministry funds or investment earnings, that stuff will be posted at year end. There's no other question on that. The next page is the balance sheet from June 30th. If there are any questions on that, that just shows the status of our funds at that time. You'll see the beginning January 1st balance and what it was at June 30.
Yes, I have a question. It's Ken Colburn. And maybe that was on the sheet before this one. But I'm looking at the investment pool, A and B, World Church.
Yes.
Okay. And there's something like, what, $2 million there. Seems like a lot of money, obviously, but yeah, are there going to be the same restrictions on that from the mission center as there are restrictions from the congregation? In other words, if we're a congregation and we wanted money from an investment pool, you've got to submit a plan, you got to ask to have a certain amount of money for a certain thing, and then you have to get that okayed before you can pull any out. Is that sequence still, does that apply to mission centers also?
Yes. Every jurisdiction is still under the minimum balance requirement. So we have to go through the same process, and we're not sure how long that will be the case. But so far, everyone's still operating under that.
So they're no more accessible to the mission center than what they are to congregations when it comes to using money from those funds. Is you okay, Jessica?
Yeah, I've been sick for a couple of weeks, so I apologize.
The bottom line was, it's like I said, is the fact that, no, that's fine. But the bottom line is that the mission center is going to operate under the same basic principles that the congregations are in terms of using that monies from the pools.
Correct.
Which basically it's, for the most part, inaccessible right now. That's my take. So I just put that on as a, okay.
Yeah, I mean, with a plan, you can be submitted, and the field support minister and apostle will look over those plans and approve them if they are able to. But yeah, that minimum balance requirement affects everybody.
A few months ago, this is Gary Gordier. A few months ago, though, they reduced those minimum balance requirements, if I remember correctly.
They did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And that is something they continue to plan to do. I think they look at them towards the beginning of every year, well, after the beginning of every year, and decide based on the status of the funds if that can be lowered or not. All right, following the balance sheet, there is a summary of funds that explains each of those funds that were listed on the balance sheet. What they're used for, how they became part of the Mission Center assets and whatnot. I will mention that the operating investment fund and the youth camp investment fund, that is what we are holding in pool A. So from now on, you should see that the number in pool A equals the sum of both of those funds. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the preliminary proposed budget for 2022. This should look very how it has in the past. The first column there, you'll see the 2020 actual amounts. And I do have to make a correction. So if you look down to the salaries and benefits and payroll processing fees, that 98,000 and the 14,000 should all be combined under the salaries and benefits, which would be 112,628.69. That is because the $14,000 amount was the expense for the invitation support minister for last year. So that was part of the salaries. And then the number below that, the 1,913, is the payroll processing fees. And then the youth camp and spec ministry should not be a line on there, because that is coming from the youth camp ministries fund. So after the 2020 actual, the next column you'll see what this year's budget is. And then the following column will be what we're proposing so far for next year. The congregational support amount is based on congregation's current level of giving for this year, minus the commitments that we would typically get from congregations that have closed during this year. So the past few years, we have asked you to decrease that amount by 10% and give that to other ministries. We're asking that it stays the same for next year.
Can you tell us what congregations are closed?
Yes, Ludington has closed. Jackson is in the process of closing. Sault Ste. Marie, well, that has been closed, that has sold. What are the other ones, Dan? I'm drawing a blank.
I think those are the two that we plan for in the budget. There are some other congregations
Yeah, Ludington and Jackson.
that have closed or are considering closing, but those are the two that will be impacting the congregation support line item that we know of.
For the most part, the rest of that proposal is very similar to what it was for this year. We have made some small adjustments. We have increased the salaries and benefits line by $5,000. So that's why the budget and all has increased by $5,000 for next year. And just small adjustments where we saw room where we could cut things, or where, well, we didn't really decrease anything, where we can make some changes. There is also a narrative starting on the bottom of that page and going through the next that explains these different line items, if you have specific questions about what they are used for. And after you've taken a look, if there are any questions, we can take those. Any questions or comments about that proposed budget?
Jessica,
Yes.
the congregation services income,
Yeah.
you have 4,000 for this year and then 2,000 for next year. Are you anticipating congregations dropping out of using services?
No. We had increased that for 2021, thinking that we were contemplating charging a fee for some services. We even had talked about an audit fee, but at this time, I mean, we don't know that that's actually the best way to go. So we've put it back at the 2,000 where it has been the few years prior to 2021. That is mainly right now, that is mainly because of the congregation services are the payroll fees for congregations.
So you're not going to be charging for audits?
It's something we're still talking about. It's not something that we're planning for next year. We had, we had talked about it, but given that we were not able to do them last year and we're currently doing 2-year audits, yeah, it's something we're just still talking about. Just as there might be room for, I have to deal with some congregations not having issues with some CFO services, perhaps charging amounts for those, but that's something that we're just working through. So right now we're just budgeting for the basically the payroll fees.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing or hearing any other questions. I will note that the last page in that packet is the congregation form that we would like pastors and or CFOs to return with their commitment amounts for next year. Dan, is there anything else you want to say about the budget?
It's a sacred story that connects fathers with their sons and daughters.
No,
I've probably got another question that I would ask,
Okay, Ken.
and I'm I'm still struggling with, obviously, we're struggling as far as congregational budgets. We're struggling as far as mission center budgets. And we're trying to come up with dollars to make happen what we want to happen. And I'm going back to my original commentary about the investment pools, a couple $1 million sitting there. And I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure why, as we struggle to try to make a mission center budget, why we cannot draw some of that out sometimes to supplement our budget to make it a less stressful situation. And, not to the tune of, drawing out the whole budget or anything, but at least helping to supplement that somewhat, rather than leaving $2 million sitting there in an investment pool. For what? What's it going to get used for if we don't? We need things now, and we need them on a practical level. And if we need to take some out and help supplement even, the salaries and benefits or whatever, well, so be it. So where am I not thinking quite right here on my thoughts?
I will say that currently we do budget the earnings from those as income. Dan's gonna highlight it there, which we have increased. I mean, that's based on a
Right, you're using interest from it to help
Yeah.
supplement the budget. Okay, but I'm thinking we might even have to go the route if we do some of the principal there instead of just the interest from there. It's a thought.
Thanks, Ken. I can just add to that as
Yeah.
you see, we've planned for that. As Jessica pointed out, the operating investment fund and the youth camp investment fund, we treat those as if they were endowments. Congregations over the years and building sales have contributed to that fund, both of those, so that they would replace their giving. So in recent years, as congregations have closed, we've asked for an amount in net proceeds or remaining cash that would allow these endowments, so to speak, generate annual interest to replace that giving. So for example, if a congregation were giving $4,000 to the mission center, we would ask for an amount of $100,000, and then that would at 4% give us that $4,000 every year. In theory, it wouldn't impact the budget. We haven't always gotten that amount. It's not exact, but that's why those numbers, what Jessica mentioned in Pool A, and Pool A is the long-term higher risk fund, which over time averages about 7%, and we spend about 4%. The Pool B funds basically are the rest of these funds that we hold. We don't keep them on our checking account, but these are restricted by the conference. So as to why we hold those in the investment pool, the Camping and Gathering Fund, Carlton Sale Fund, the Disciple Development Fund, we hold those there because the conference has restricted them and we can only use them for those purposes. And then all these up here are the funds we use to pay bills for the various purposes there. So they add up to a nice amount, which allows us to get interest at the Pool B rate of about 1 to 2%. But those aren't liquid funds, not because of the minimum balance. That is one factor, but because Pool A, we would not intend to spend the principal, and Pool B, we would only spend for the purpose of each fund. And so the minimum balance so far has not impacted the mission center's funds because we wouldn't plan to spend that amount anyhow. And as was mentioned, the minimum balance has been decreased now. It's at a level where we would not be asking for that amount. Some congregations and campgrounds have reached the place where they've needed to reach more of their funds that are in the minimum balance. And in those situations, we have been able to work out where the mission center can take on that minimum balance amount on our books, meaning we would have more funds restricted than we would need to from the initial calculations to allow another congregation or campground to have some of their funds unrestricted. And we can do that on a case-by-case basis since we have that large amount in Pool A that we don't plan to spend.
Thank you.
I have a question about the form at the end and all of those categories, where it starts out with the Mission Center budget, youth camps. Then it says Campus Ministries Center. With the changeover in Journey House, what does this represent?
That will be contributing to the same facility. So if you haven't heard or seen the announcement, the Journey House Board ended its operations for leasing to students, but we are going to continue ownership of the facility and transition to a disciple development focus as a campus ministry center. So we'll still have the insurance and utilities and maintenance costs for the building. And we're hoping to use that as a lending library where people could come get books, projectors, TVs, labyrinths, other things we have there. And then also host small group retreats, staff meetings, potentially internships or graduate assistants, or people who want to come on personal retreats to do study, reading, preparation for sermons, whatever those things might be. We don't have those details worked out yet, but that's the hope, is to have that building as a mission center resource for library retreats, overnight stays, etc. And so we'll hopefully cover much of the cost through donations for people who use the facility. The East Lansing congregation at this point is planning to continue meeting there and contribute as they did when Journey House was functioning. So that will cover some of the costs, but the remaining we'll need to do through congregations, donations, fundraisers going forward. We are inheriting the remaining cash assets and investment pool from the Journey House board. And that came from people and congregations over the years. So we have funding to cover operations through this transition period and hopefully have a much clearer picture next year of how it's working and what the actual need is. But at this point, if there are congregations who were contributing to Journey House and want to still contribute to this new focus of disciple development, or if there are new congregations that are excited about that, we would appreciate whatever commitments congregations might want to make to that change in focus.
So that line really is a support line for the center, for the facility.
Yes.
Will you be sending a reminder to people of what they pledged last year?
Jessica, the question was, would you be sending a reminder to congregations on what they pledged last year?
I can. I mean, it's not something we've been asked to do in the past, but I certainly can.
That came from Mary at East Lansing in particular,
Okay.
but if there are others out there who wanted to know that. Okay, is there any other questions on any of the numbers or forms in the packet? See anyone else? We'll take that down then.
I did have one question.
Yes.
This is Nancy from Grand Valley. On the portion on our sheet where it says World Mission Ties and Bridge of Hope Project, that's something that's paid to World Church. So do you really want those figures on this sheet?
It's helpful to have, it's helpful information just to have so that we can make sure they have been and are being recorded correctly, especially with the Bridge of Hope. There's several different purpose codes in the contributions module. So there's one that's specific for congregations budgeted support. So if we know that, we can look and make sure that's how it got recorded. But you're right, those are withdrawn directly from World Church. It's similar to the campgrounds. Each of the campgrounds, those funds actually go to the board treasurer or financial officer, except for the general campground support. But it's helpful again to know what's being given and to be able to tell those treasurers what they can expect from who.
Okay, that's all I needed. Thanks.
Okay, well, we hope that helped you to understand the information in the packet and get your questions answered. We have some time left then. If you wanted to ask additional questions about anything in the Mission Center or leading up to fall conference that you're curious about.
Did somewhere in here, maybe I missed that as I was reading stuff earlier, but I thought they were gonna make some commentary as far as staffing in that, or?
Yes.
I didn't quite know what you.
There was
But
a,
maybe I thought maybe you're gonna have something to say as far as any kind of projected staff arrangements or whatever. Maybe I misunderstood that.
what we have in the packet was on the expenses line item in the narrative. There's a brief statement, just that amount of 155,000 will allow us to have about 2.5 full-time employees. And there was a note that the camping coordinator position is funded separately from that. So we don't have any real details in the packet. I can kind of share our thinking is that at this point, we're hoping to staff Jessica full-time as the Mission Center financial officer, Linda Stanbridge full-time as the Mission Center invitation support minister, and myself in a part-time capacity as Mission Center president. That's what we would fund through the operating budget in the salaries line item. And then outside of the Mission Center budget would be a hopefully full-time position for Winnie Johnston in camping and gathering ministries. That will be youth camps, family camps, retreats, and other items like that. So we're currently working on benefits packages. This will be a little bit new for us in that we would have full-time employees that are not World Church funded positions. So to give you a little bit more detail, the Mission Center president and Mission Center financial officer positions, since they are appointed by the World Church, those are packages that are on the payroll at World Church through Human Resource Ministries. And those position amounts and benefits are set by the World Church Human Resources Board. So we then as a Mission Center just billed for the appropriate amount depending on who the employee is and their experience and education, et cetera. So when we hire full-time as a Mission Center, though, we can either participate in the World Church benefits package and use their rates and coverages, or we can decline that and then determine our own coverages locally. And based on the initial exploration with the folks we'd like to have full-time locally, the coverage through the World Church insurance probably is not going to best meet their needs. So we'll, in the next few months, hopefully be able to identify local benefits packages and figure out the costs of those. And then I would just add to that, our intent in bringing Winnie and Linda to full-time status is that we would also have enough usage increase at Park of the Pines and Blue Water to justify full-time with benefits positions for the resident managers at the campgrounds, which would be Kurt Stanbridge and Bill Johnston, spouses of Linda and Winnie. So we think we're well positioned right now with those two places to increase the ministries that the Mission Center is offering using our operating budget and our designated funds for Winnie and Linda to focus on treats and activities that will generate increased income so the campgrounds can have their managers at full time. So overall, then we would have 4 full-time Mission Center level employees, along with the 2 officers, Jessica at full-time and myself part-time. So I think that gives you a better sketch of our thoughts on staffing. We don't have the exact names and hours just because of those specifics for benefits. But I think by the time we get a proposed budget out with the conference materials, we should have that more solidified.
Thanks, Dan. That gives a little broader perspective.
What other questions do you have for us tonight? Don't see anyone looking to speak, so I'll just say thank you again for joining us. Let me see if there's anything in the chats I missed. It doesn't look like any questions are there. Just a reminder then that we're asking if you can have your commitments from congregations to Jessica by September 15th. We would appreciate that. And if you don't have an official business meeting by then, to at least notify her if you think the congregation is going to be decreasing its commitments so that we can adjust our planning. And then you would need to submit any resolutions from congregations by October 7th, and then delegates by October 9th for the conference 4 weeks later on November 6th. I should also mention that the World Conference will now be held, or was planned to be held in 2023. And the deadline for legislation to a World Conference is 1 year prior. So that means June of 2022, or April, actually, I think the date's shifted. But this will be our last conference before that deadline in 2022. So if there's anything that congregation wants to propose to World Conference, it needs to first come to this Mission Center conference this fall. And that means first to the congregation by that October 7th date. If something immediate comes up after that date, that's time sensitive, that wasn't known at the time, or as a result of what happened at the conference itself, the Mission Center president team can approve new business basically on an emergency basis, but we would hesitate to do that unless it really is a brand new item that came up after the deadline. So we haven't had too many resolutions in recent years. So I just wanted to note that if you have any topics or issues you think the Mission Center or World Conference should be considering, let me know. I'd be glad to help you with drafting the resolution. And I serve on the World Conference resolutions team, so we can get their input to help you perfect those as best as possible early on, and then bring them to your congregational conference so they can be approved. It doesn't mean that the congregation has to adopt them, as in that they agree with it, but just that they're agreeing to submit it for consideration. And that would be the same at the Mission Center. The Mission Center doesn't have to approve the resolution, but has to approve it for submission to the World Conference. And as always, if you have questions about delegates, legislation, or any procedures at conferences, I can certainly help with those questions. Congregations can still continue to use the emergency guidelines for including people via electronic means. That's not specifically in the church bylaws at this point, but the First Presidency has used its authority to grant that option and the apostle to congregations and mission centers. So if you are meeting online only or in a hybrid format, you can continue to do that for your business meetings coming up.
Dan, may I take personal privilege here just a second?
Yeah.
Erica, if you haven't already read my email, make sure you do so. I just passed on a warm fuzzy to her for some really nice support that she gave our Thornapple River congregation. And I sent her an email on that. So if you haven't read it, read it. I won't take time with everything it said with you guys, but I'm giving her a warm fuzzy. Thank you for that, allowing me to do that.
All right, everyone, then. Any last questions or comments? Okay, well, we appreciate your time. We hope that was informative, and we hope you'll share it with your congregations and others you know. If you hear of new questions, let us know, and we'll try to get this recording posted so you can share it with anybody who wasn't able to join as well. But definitely pass the packet along to anybody who might want to know more, or send them to Jessica or myself. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the night.